Hi, Valentina. Welcome to the Finite Podcast.
Hi, good to be on. Thanks for having me.
It's lovely to have you here. You're a fintech communications and corporate affairs expert who has worked at the hugely successful OakNorth Bank throughout its growth journey. So I'm sure you have a great story attached to that, and I can't wait to hear more about it. But before we do that, can I hear a little bit about your background, your career history, how you got into comms, and anything like that?
Yeah, sure. So my mum's actually an entrepreneur. Kind of more out of necessity. She was a single mum with four kids. And she hadn't, she dropped out of college. She sort of felt like entrepreneurship was a means to an end in some ways, and then ended up actually building a very successful business, which she's still running today, and that a couple of my siblings are now part of. Um, but for me, I think I'd always sort of felt that communications was something that I had seen her do in her business or seen other people do in the business. And I thought, storytelling, it's sort of something that I think humans do naturally. And if you have a good story, it can be incredibly memorable. It can really change someone's entire perspective or their entire view. So I always enjoyed storytelling. And I think communications is something that I knew from a young age was. I mean, I didn't know that that was what it was. I just knew storytelling was something that I wanted to do when I was older. And then I went to university in 2008. So, peak of the financial crisis, or actually not the peak, but the start of the peak of the financial crisis. And I did a business degree of all things. So I sort of spent the next 3 years here in London, just sort of hearing about how awful the banks were and how consumers had lost trust in them, and also how I wouldn't get a job after I graduated. But I think a number of things sort of happened over the sort of that period that I was studying. You did have obviously the financial crisis, and you did have this undermining of trust in traditional financial services. Coupled with that, you had a sort of regulatory desire to create more competition, and lower the barriers to entry, which ultimately enabled new players like OakNorth to come to the market. And then you also had the proliferation of the smartphone. So the first iPhone came into people's hands, I think, end of 2007. By the time I graduated, everybody had moved from their Nokia 3310 or Motorola flip phone to a smartphone in many cases. And it was really the first time that you could do your banking and your financial and personal financial management on the go. So it was kind of a perfect storm of things, which meant that I felt that it would be a really interesting time to go into financial services communications specifically and corporate comms. And then my flatmate and I were, sort of, or one of my flatmates at the time, and best friend, we were sort of like looking at, what we could do in terms of getting work experience and jobs. And we saw on the Chartered Institute of Public Relations, they were doing this drinks and links event, which was like a free event. You just needed to kind of sign up and register. And then there were like some drinks. It would be in like a nice bar or something, and they'd be with a bunch of comms people. And I remember we went to that event, and I didn't know at the time, but which was just naive of me. But most companies will have some kind of referral program. So actually, a lot of senior people will go to these kinds of events because it's a great way to meet hungry grads who want to get a job. And then obviously, if they end up joining the organization, then that individual will get some kind of referral bonus or other benefit, which kind of, I guess, is an incentive for them to want to go to these things and for it to actually be worthwhile going. People sometimes think, oh, but if it's a free event or it's like something like that, there's not going to be anybody. It's just going to be in a room full of students. But there are a lot of students there, or a lot of people who are recent graduates. But there's also a lot of people who are looking for fresh talent, right? Um, Whether it's because they obviously are trying to grow their organization, or it's because they think it's a great way to to get a nice little benefit. So we went to this event, met lots of interesting people, and I met a woman who told me about the grad program at Lansons, which is an agency based in Farringdon. And they took on maybe, I don't know, between 8 and 10 grads each year. So I applied for the program, I got in, and my first client there actually was Metro Bank, so the first new bank in the UK in 150 years. And it's funny now to think back because, obviously today, if you were to go into the regulators and say, I want to start a new bank, it's going to be really, really special because it's going to be a bricks and mortar led bank that, will be really unique because it will be open 363 days of the year. You'd probably be laughed out of the building, right? It just shows you how much things have changed, right? That was considered a very novel model, 14 years ago. So I think you have to you get the opportunity to try a whole bunch of different things, to work across a really broad range of customers, and then hopefully decide the thing that interests you. For me, that ended up being very clearly that I really liked the challenger brands. I really found that I was leaning more towards that. And I got the opportunity then to really kind of build out my portfolio of clients within Lansons across a broad array of challengers, whether it was sort of new auto enrollment providers that had come into market because of auto enrollment being brought to the UK, or a crowdfunding platform, or challenger banks like Metro. What actually happened, I moved to a small agency which doesn't actually exist anymore, but they had a client which was OakNorth, and so I met Rishi in June 2015. So this was a few months after OakNorth got its provisional banking license, which is what Revolut currently has. They were in a phase called mobilization, which is the phase that Revolut is currently in, where essentially you sort of have to prove that you can be a real bank and you can operate with the sort of the governance and the regulatory within the regulatory sort of boundaries that have been set in an appropriate way. And I met Rishi in June 2015. And, immediately the mission just really resonated with me because, I said, my mum's an entrepreneur. I've seen firsthand all of the challenges that she's faced in building her business, and she used to sort of, she used to sort of invent like a fake, business partner to sort of chase things up, whether that was invoices or other things, just because, I guess the good cop, bad cop strategy could be quite helpful in some instances. But yeah, I mean, I saw the sort of the hours that were spent on the phone with the bank, and that also can be a very lonely place to be an entrepreneur. So anything that can be done to make your life easier should be done, and unfortunately with banking that's not always what happens. So when I met Rishi, and I met Rishi first and then Joel later, I just couldn't believe that these two guys had built such an incredible business, because they had founded a previous company called Copal in their 20s, which over 12 years they'd scaled to 3,000 employees, and then sold it to Moody's Corporation in 2014. And I just couldn't believe that two guys who had built a company over 12 years, who'd had such a successful exit, and like there were maybe 5 articles about them on Google. Um, and it just wasn't the nature of the business that they built. It was a data and analytics company. So it wasn't one that sort of really, I guess, lived off PR or needed PR to thrive. And so, I think one of the things that was very refreshing to me was how open Rishi was to PR, and sort of how supportive he was of it, considering that he hadn't come from a business where PR had been something that they had done, from the get go. And I think it's set marketing. Everybody knows what marketing is, right? But PR, people often confuse it, or they say, oh, it's not tangible, and parts of PR aren't tangible, but parts of PR are. And what I mean by that is, like, if you do, let's say at OakNorth, if we do PR on a deal that we've closed, a loan that we've closed, and then we get a bunch of coverage on it, and then a bunch of people apply for a loan or get in touch with us through the website, and then a loan gets done. That's very easy to say that loan happened because we did this PR on this deal. And if we hadn't done that PR, it's possible that that business never would have heard about us, and they would have got their loan elsewhere. Equally, you can have things where maybe there's a crisis comm situation, and you prevent a bad article from being published, or at the very least you do damage control, and the article's not as bad as it could have been, because you manage the situation effectively and you've built a good relationship with that journalist or that news outlet over the years. And that's not really tangible, because you don't know how much headache you've saved the company by minimizing that crisis or potentially removing that crisis altogether. So there are parts of comms that are intangible, and it's hard to sort of put a monetary value on it. But there are obviously, as I say, there are parts which you can. And so I will pause there, because I realize I've been chatting for a while, and you asked me an initial question of how I got into fintech. So how I got into
No, thank you. There was a lot there, a lot that I think some of our maybe more junior listeners can latch onto about how to network like properly and how to leverage networking events to reap the benefits of an agency early in your career, work with a diverse range of clients,
yeah.
and yeah, kind of grasp onto those opportunities and not be scared to whittle down your interests and go for them. So yeah, thank you for that. Um, whilst we do have a lot of more junior listeners of the Finite Podcast, we also have lots of heads, VPs, and other CMOs who I'm sure are desperate to learn more about your role at OakNorth, how you kind of rose the ranks, and your like kind of your career switch from communications to this corporate affairs role that you're currently in.
Yeah.
So could you tell us a little bit about your current role and team?
Yeah, absolutely. And over the years, Rishi, who was my line manager, just kind of gave me different opportunities to push myself, challenge myself, and also was very open to me suggesting things and saying, well, what if I could do that, and would you be open for me doing this, and being like, go for it. He's kind of a classic entrepreneur, and I think really so many people at Oak North, even though like myself, we're not entrepreneurs, but for many of the people, I mean, half of Exco, they're still there today, those people who joined in the very early days like I did. And to leave an organization, in some of their cases, they had been in large financial services organizations for 30 years. To leave a safe job where you probably have loads of friends and you're sort of really kind of institutionalized in a way, to then join a startup that had no money and no profit and no kind of at that point no idea that it would be successful. You have to be kind of an entrepreneur, and you've got certainly entrepreneurial traits, right? Like being a bit of a risk taker and being someone who is happy to kind of jump a bit into the unknown. And I think this is one of the things at Oak North, that so many of the team are very entrepreneurial. They really have the entrepreneurial growth mindset, that even if they're not entrepreneurs themselves, you kind of feel that in everything we do and the way that we interact and service our customers. And so I think it's just been an environment that's been very conducive to someone like me, who is a bit of a workaholic, but maybe that's just the recipe of being the daughter of my mother and seeing how hard she worked because she was an entrepreneur and a single mom of four, and everything she had to sacrifice. I think for me, I feel like I've got it really easy compared to her. But also that she always instilled in us, that you should find something that you absolutely love, because then, you'll probably do a really good job in it, and it won't even feel like work. When you get your paycheck each month, it'll just feel like a real bonus kind of thing. And I think that is something that is a big part of why I've stayed at Oak North, because I do really enjoy the work that I do, and I really love working with the team. And as you say, the role over time through the opportunities that I've been given has broadened. So now I, in addition to comms, internal and external comms, also oversee our ESG and sustainability, and we have some very ambitious net zero targets. We are actually net zero for scope 1 and 2 emissions since 2019. So the big one is scope 3, and working with our customers to transition to greener operations, as well as our CSR, or what we call our 1+1% commitment, which is where we give 1% of our profits and 1% of our team's time to supporting charitable causes and initiatives that we feel are aligned with our mission to empower entrepreneurs. And so I get to work with some amazing charities, some amazing organizations, in some cases building programs from the ground up. So one of the charities we worked with is Founders for Schools. It's an amazing charity founded by an incredible woman called Sherry Kutu, a bit of a force of nature. And working with Rishi and the team to build this program with Sherry and her team last October. So we actually had the kind of the anniversary very recently, and just seeing the impact that it's having to young people. It's a program that's really designed to create mentorship and advice and career opportunities for children aged between 11 and 16 who are looking to study STEM subjects. So that's been an amazing, part of the business to be involved with, and also seeing all the different ways in which our team volunteer and use their 1% time. I mean, it's not something obligatory. You can, it's a benefit, so you can use it or lose it. But fortunately, many people in the organization do use it, and just seeing the kinds of things that they want to do, things they want to get involved with. For example, myself, I'm a bookmark reading volunteer. I've just recently kind of passed on my DBS checks to do that, but I'll be able to kind of work with a young person, helping them to read more confidently and hopefully enjoy reading, as much as I do. So, that's a really rewarding part of the role and the parts of the business that I oversee. And then events and content, which are really, I guess, part of the broader marketing mix. But just when we first started OakNorth, we didn't actually have a marketing person, right? So I was doing a secondment, and when I joined, I sort of was the comms person, but also wore a lot of the marketing hat for a lot of things. So we didn't actually hire a marketing director until October 2021. So about 6 years into the business, which is crazy because to think we reached, a business by that point that was making well over 100 million profit and never had hired a marketing person. It's not to say we didn't do any marketing, because of course, anytime Rishi spoke at an event, or anytime, you did a social media post, in theory, those things are marketing, but we never did any kind of traditional above the line sophisticated marketing campaigns or anything like that. And we didn't have a kind of dedicated person or team doing marketing. So it was all kind of comms, word of mouth, and just, the team's network that got the business to grow until that point. And then, it kind of got to, 2021, and Rishi and I were having a conversation about the team and whether it made sense to, hire an additional comms person. And, we sort of said, actually, maybe we should hire someone who can do marketing specifically. And we ended up hiring a great guy called Hugo, who joined us in October 21. And he's built an amazing team, and just like it should be, the comms and the marketing function should work, hand in hand, because the work that you'll do can be amplified if you work closely together. But I know that in a lot of organizations, the marketing and comms teams are often, at each other's throats because they have competing budget. Um, I think what works really well, Hugo and I sit next to each other in the organization, so we're very aware of what projects the other is working on. And there's a lot of work that, as I say, whether it's events or content, where there's overlap with comms, where we can then hopefully help to just get numerous bites of the cherry and make someone's work just kind of go that much further in terms of impact and return on investment.
Amazing. Thank you so much. That's such great insight into your career so far at Oak North. I just want to emphasize that point you made about entrepreneurship in a startup, and how kind of the beating heart of a startup is everyone mucking in and treating it like it's its own business, and yeah, really owning that their functions. So thank you for sharing that, and yeah, other really great insights and tips. We're coming to the end of the episode, but I want to ask you one more question, because you are a fintech queen. You've been immersed in fintech and fintech networks all your career. So, how do you see fintech evolving? You mentioned like the birth of fintech is this is these challenger brands coming to slash and be better than these traditional banks. Do you think that these fintechs will cement their positions as legacies? There'll be even more fintechs coming in. Yeah, how do you see that sector playing out?
So I mean, undoubtedly there'll be more fintechs coming in, and this is really an amazing time for that to be happening, because economically we've been through a challenging period. We're kind of coming out of it now, right? Inflation's back down, but we reached a peak of about 11% in 2022. We had the cost of living crisis. We had a lot of uncertainty kind of politically. And we had sort of just kind of very recently come out of COVID. So there was a lot of residual COVID stress across a number of parts of the economy. And that's a great time for new businesses to be born, right? Because maybe a lot of companies, and we saw that in the immediate aftermath of COVID, across the whole tech industry across the world, thousands and thousands of layoffs were made. Um, and what ended up happening in a lot of cases was that people then went out and started their own companies, right? Because they might have had a skill set that was, pretty unique for where they were and in their industry, and not necessarily something where it would have been immediately easy to find a new role. And this is what you saw in the financial crisis as well, where a lot of new businesses were born. Now, obviously, most businesses will fail, and that's just the nature of how it is. But you will end up with some diamonds that kind of come out of that, and some amazing businesses. So I'm absolutely sure we'll see some amazing fintechs being born, and that have already been born, and that will kind of continue to grow and scale from here. I think you'll continue to see, the more mature fintechs, like, I mean, most of those that came around, that launched in the sort of 2013 to 2016 period, most have now reached a scale where they are profitable, right? OakNorth, Revolut, Monzo. I mean, OakNorth has been profitable for many, many years. But, most of the other fintechs, Zopa, Starling, they've all kind of reached profitability as well. And what you've actually seen is many of them doing M&A, right? Acquiring smaller fintechs or acquiring other businesses, launching into new markets. Um, so I think you're going to kind of see this sort of original cohort of fintechs that have reached a certain scale and that are now kind of very mature, and in some cases have, like Revolut, tens of millions of customers. And then, I think you can't really dismiss the amazing changes that fintech has driven in the large traditional financial institutions, right? I mean, it's less so in commercial, certainly much more in sort of consumer banking or retail banking, but like, you know, look at what I mean now. If you go to a Barclays or a Lloyd's, like, your personal experience, the app that you'll be using is probably pretty good, and probably has a lot of the same features that you would experience with one of the new fintechs. And with the emergence of things like generative AI, chatbots have been around for ages, but I would say they've only really got much, much better, for me, at least in my experience, in the last 6 months, probably because of things like Gen AI. It really feels like you're dealing with a human in a lot of cases. And so I think you're just going to see that more and more, and you will see the large players. Look at Chase, right? That comes from one of the largest and most traditional, one of the oldest financial services institutions in the world, and I bank with Chase, and it's an amazing experience. So I think they are definitely they've been watching what fintechs have been doing. They have very deep pockets. They have the ability to acquire and invest, and they don't always get it right. Right? We've seen, Marcus kind of came to market with big fanfare, and has been, pretty muted in terms of growth for the last kind of 18 months or so. Obviously, you saw Bo was another one out of NatWest or RBS. So they have had experiences of building or trying to build challenger banks, but I think they've looked at what has worked, and then they've been made those investments to improve their own propositions. So I think we'll see a combination of maturing fintechs, new fintechs coming to the market, but don't underestimate the ones that have stood the test of time. There's a reason they're still here after hundreds of years, right? I think thinking they're just going to go away quietly because some new kids are on the block is just not going to happen.
Definitely, definitely. But still inspiring for all those up and coming fintechs who are trying to grow and trying to launch their brands still.
Yeah.
All power to them. So thank you so much for coming on the show, Valentina. It's been a pleasure to hear.